I can.
All right, so we are live. Is everybody here?
We're live.
All right. So, Mike, thanks again. Mika, thank you for taking time to talk to us.
It's my pleasure.
And I think we'll let you go first, and then, we can jump in with questions once we.
All right. So I can give. People seem to have kind of a primer of who I am, what I've done, but I'll give you a real brief.
That'd be
I've been
great.
making games for about 20 years, starting way back on Game Boy, and actually before that on Commodore 64 and Amiga, PC, then the Game Boy. And I've worked on a lot of different games. I've worked on I'm almost at 200 games I've worked on now. So they've mostly been smaller games, like handheld, digital, that sort of thing. I haven't worked on bigger games, although I've worked on games like Rock Band and Street Fighter and stuff like that. But it's always been ports or ancillary games and that sort of thing. iDarb is one of the few original games that I've worked on and published. And it basically started out as simply a tweet. I had no idea what I was going to make. I had no budget, no time, anything for it. So it just was a side project that lasted for about a year that somehow miraculously got published on Xbox One. So it was one of these things where I missed what it was like to code for myself and for my friends. So I kind of created a new project, and I started working on it after the kids went to bed, and I would tweet about my progress, and that's kind of how it all started. And it was very fortuitous too that a friend of mine by the name of Tim Schaefer happened to respond early on because he had so many followers. I had like 20. He had like 1 million plus, 22 million. Who knows what he has? It's like 1 billion. And because he interacted, I think that drew everybody's attention to what I was doing, and that kind of really kickstarted it. And through the whole process, it was kind of a new thing for me because it felt like a game jam from the beginning. Because it was just I had no clue where it was going, and I just kind of recklessly took any dumb idea that came my way, and I would try to put it in. And I wouldn't just take any idea and put it in and see what would happen. It was more or less like what somebody has referred to as a monarchy style of crowd design. So I would take an idea and then try to interpret it as I would see fit to work with the game and where the game was going and where it was at the moment to try to make it actually be something that wouldn't destroy the integrity of the game, the design. So all along the way, when I would get like a dumb idea, like, I don't know, put like Rick Astley in or whatever, it'd be like, how can I do this without breaking the game? And that's what led to Hash Bombs, which you guys experienced there, and also led to the halftime shows, because some ideas just made no sense at all, but they made sense somehow in the context of just trolling the game, or in the halftime show where it doesn't really matter what you do there. But that's generally my background. I was just a kid coder who managed to somehow keep making game after game after game, and this is one of the few games I think I've worked on that it's got the most attention. So there we go.
Awesome. I guess we can start out with questions from our group here.
Okay.
And we'll open it up. Let me make sure I get this out on Twitter so people know what we're doing. I guess in general, since we're doing a game jam, do you do game jams much, or what's your?
Yeah, I would when I was younger a lot more, and then I did before they were called game jams. It was just wasting time. And then we had one, I think 2 years ago here in the studio that we're all very happy with. And the game I was working on was it was kind of like Star Citizen, but it was dogs, and that one was pretty fun. And that was like one of these things where it was like it was insane. We did it in 24 hours instead of 48 or 72. And the fact that we were able to, within 24 hours, make a complete game, kind of open our minds to the idea of doing things like iDarb and that sort of thing. But to me, the best experience is game jams, because when you go in with no idea, like iDarb was basically a whole game jam, no idea what we're going to be doing and how to do it, and to have something that feels complete by the end of it and in short time too is awesome to me.
Yeah, Danny.
So what's your plan for after iDarb? Are you allowed to tell us, like, are you working on a new game, or is it not announced yet, or?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a bit more iDarb because we're going to be updating it with a lot of stuff soon. Basically moving towards a more tournament edition of iDarb with a lot more content and stuff. But we also have this other project we're working on that we can't announce just yet, but you'll hear more about it at E3, and it's going to be kind of the best I can say is it's like IDARB times 10 and on speed, which is weird because it already is, but it's crazy. It's going to include, it's going to take the notion of how we built IDARB and blow it out even more because it was so fun to do that. Now we're going to take a look at what it would be if we went further with that concept.
Okay,
you mentioned earlier about the crowd development and the way that you handle it like a monarchy. There's a subforum on Reddit right now that's doing a democracy style where everyone is contributing whatever they're able to do, and they're trying to make a fake modern clone. How much do you see that moving, that idea of crowd development moving forward in the future with the way that things are going right now?
If you asked me a year and a half ago, I would have thought it was a really bad idea. But having gone through IDARB now, I don't know what the ideal way to do it is. We're still trying to figure that out, and that's what this next project's all about too. But things that I just assumed would never work, like taking ideas from anywhere, too many cooks in the kitchen sort of thing, that in my career has always been terrible. And so this was kind of something I expected to be even worse. We did, but it turns out that people who obviously play games know a lot about games, and they will actually take it very seriously. I was surprised by the amount of serious contribution that came in for the game. So I'd like to see where that goes too. I'm going to look it up after we talk and see where the progress is on that. But I think it's pretty amazing. And for me to want to do it again now and invest more time in that is kind of proof of that, I think.
Pokemon Sage is the name of the thing if you're going to look it up.
Okay.
Pokemon Sage.
All right.
All right. Any other? Daniel, go for it.
So I read that you made IDARB using your own custom engine that you built yourself, or something like called Cake, I believe, or something like that. What was the most challenging part of developing your own engine?
The most challenging part, I've always found it more challenging to use other people's engines because I'm too lazy to figure out how to use them. And so it's always been easier. And I don't make very complicated games. Obviously, IDARB, and you look at it on the wall there, I think most people who just look at it and don't know anything about it are going to be like, what is this piece of crap? But it's a 2D engine. We called it Bake Sale. And probably the biggest hurdle we had, because we're developing for a console that was fairly new, we didn't understand all the systems of that console. They have these things on the Xbox One called XRs, which are Xbox requirements, and you have to meet this certain criteria. And we had to spend a lot of time with that because we would do things that should work on anything, and Microsoft would kick it back and say, "Well, you can't do this on Xbox. We can't look up a user's name and use that in any reference and any sort of saved data because that's a privacy issue," or all these other kinds of things that would come up. So that was the most challenging part, was making sure that we had all the Xbox specific things and the policies all covered. We would submit our game and we'd surprisingly get we're kicked out. And we did that probably, in the end, probably 6 or 7 times. And every time you submit, it's 2 weeks minimum that you're going to get a response back on your last build. So we could have come out probably October last year had we not been so careless in our coding for the Xbox.
John, any question? Do you feel so with the this idea of community development? As you're going along, were there any issues where you wanted to just kind of stop it? I mean, did you have anyone try to take over, or any such negative feedback that you kind of felt like you should stop, or was it all averaging out enough to be positive that you wanted to keep on going with it?
The way you described that there in the end is actually pretty much accurate. It averaged out enough to make you want to keep going. Okay. Because when you do anything with the internet involved, you can only imagine how awful it is every step of the way. And so I just had to take that with a grain of salt. I had done this hack a few years ago for my daughter, which was a Donkey Kong game, and I hacked Mario to be the girl saving Mario. And the amount of hate and vitriol that came from that kind of primed me for what was going to happen with IDARB. And so I'd learned to tune that out, but I would just glom onto all the positive things that would come in. And after a while, you just get used to that, the noise reduction that you just mentally have when you start referring to people on Twitter and through Facebook and everywhere, even Reddit and everything. You just start to get used to it. And so when something positive comes over the transit like that, and when it comes from the internet, like even a simple like, I think this looks kind of neat, that you just magnify that because like you don't ever hear that coming from the internet. So that helped every step of the way. And the other thing that really helped too was that we're kind of going for this kind of ludicrous game idea that like made people pretty much like every time you would show a screenshot or people would be like, what the F is this? And so it's like you kind of got energized and wanting to prove that could be something still fun. To me, the most exciting part was how can I make this game that people would never give a chance, making it so fun that when they do play it, they're like, okay, this is a great game. So if I could convince people to even give it a shot and then like it was a big challenge for me, and that's what drove me during development.
Awesome. Okay. Alex.
How was it working with like Twitter to make, like, was it much of a headache like getting tweets to register as like game thing, sending that to the right thing, and getting all that infrastructure in?
So yeah, could you hear the question all right?
Yeah, I heard that all right. It's it was pretty easy, but it wasn't the perfect implementation. Our update that we're gonna have next is almost instantaneous. And if you use Twitch with the game, you see that the minute you enter a command and put it up there, it's in the game. Twitter takes about 10 seconds because we don't have any servers actually doing anything for this game. We're just observing Twitter and Twitch. So the next update, we're deploying a server to allow caching of the Twitter, all the tweets that people are putting towards the game, and then it makes it a lot faster. But it wasn't really difficult. And also, the minute that Twitter saw what we were doing, and I got to be honest, like when we're putting Twitch and Twitter in, I just assumed that the minute they saw what we were doing, they're going to tell us to stop because it seemed like we're going against every like bit of logic because we could probably put too much traffic one way or who knows what would happen. We didn't ask permission. We just did it. But it was the opposite. Twitter actually really liked it, and they featured it at their big conference last year, and they gave us all kinds of support. So during the update, it's the result of Twitter actually coming in and saying, oh, there's 101 better ways to do this, and they really helped us out. Twitch was the same way. As soon as we showed them what we were doing, they pretty much walked us through the whole process of making it work, and it really was easy. And at the end of the day, everything that we did is stuff you could find publicly online. And it's even more well documented now.
Yeah, question.
Dealing with using the Twitter implementation for
Here, I'll repeat it for
Yeah,
you.
just repeat it. Thank you.
Batman plus Superman.
Okay. So how far do you see extensions to the Twitch and Twitter integration in future implementations? Like, how far do you think? Because right now it has application to game, but do you think it can go farther? I guess.
Yeah. That next project we were alluding to earlier when you asked me what I'm working on next.
Okay.
That's we're taking it much further than we did with IDARB. Even in IDARB, we're going to take it a bit further. When we start going into true tournament support and everything like that in the game, we're going to be integrating way more Twitch and Twitter support. But as it stands right now in IDARB, it was really just like scratching the surface. And so what we're really going to do in this next go round, which I wish I could talk about this game we're working on. It's going to be tough to talk about it right now, but we are going much further with it. And there's things that even when we were working on IDAR, we didn't realize we could do, and that we kind of got in there. And now that we've kind of seen how far we could go with that, it's going to go much further. I wish I could give you some concrete examples, but I'm going to give away too much.
Well, do you feel? I mean, just continuing that, do you feel like the development that was so open with IDARB? Do you feel like it's being hindered at all because you have to keep certain things quiet, this time around? Does that?
Yeah, this is a weird moment. It's like a small window where we have to be quiet, but like it's only because we're working with some other people.
Sure.
And the actual development of what's going to really be happening is going to be completely open again.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're kind of developing a platform, and as soon as it's ready to go, then we just open it up to everybody, and then we kind of go with it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an awkward thing where it's like, yeah, we have this open development, but I can't tell you anything about it.
Questions? Anybody?
Do you think you could see this kind of spinning off into its own genre? Because you have things like this. They had about a year ago, they had Twitch Plays Pokemon go up where people put inputs in the Twitch chat. And do you think there's sort of like a potential for like a community game genre?
I think so, because if we look at it, I can give you a little bit of stats. So we had no marketing money, so we didn't do any marketing of any kind other than like what we were tweeting and that sort of thing. And when we were supposed to launch last year, but then we're a little bit late because we couldn't figure out how to get through Xbox Cert. I had made a lot of promises online to people who were contributing ideas that we would have the game out by the end of the year. So we actually had the game done. It went in, but we couldn't launch as Games with Gold until February. So we had months to wait. We had 2 months. And so Microsoft gave us a bunch of codes. So I thought, why not? I'll just start handing out game codes to people, and particularly streamers, because those were the people we'd like to see actually use the game and see if our theories worked and that sort of thing. So we hand out these codes, and by the time it was like 800 codes were activated, and I think we had 15 million impressions online by the end of the first month. And that was because people would stream this game, and people who were their audience, like whether it be 100 people or 200 people, the minute they could figure out they could interact, then it just kind of exploded. So, excuse me. So by having this interaction, we tapped an audience of millions that we didn't know existed. I've never had to work with before. And the potential was pretty obvious. So by the time we launched on Super Bowl Sunday, which is usually the kiss of death, we had in a single day 16 years of gameplay on Super Bowl Sunday, which is insane. So there's that audience is hungry to interact with things like Twitch Plays Pokemon. I think it was just a hungry audience wanting to do anything because they're sitting there watching this stuff anyways. If they can interact in any meaningful way, it would be explosive.
First question.
So I think IDAR released, I got it whenever it was free on Xbox. I'm just curious, how do you monetize a game that comes free on Xbox Live, or do you just like expect it to grow by itself and then make money later on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. The deal we had at Microsoft, obviously, there's a financial aspect to it, but also the fact that we built a giant audience was key, because while we're getting ready to do updates, we're planning on actually having some DLC for the game and that sort of thing. And now that we have an audience of almost 2 million people, that's going to be a great audience to tap. So I'm not too worried about how we monetize it. I mean, I am, because we haven't done it yet. But for a game that's actively played every day by 150,000 unique users a day, pretty much at this point, I'm not worried about it, because in mobile terms, there's going to be an easy way to monetize that.
Have you considered the possibility of allowing the streamers that have like these huge audiences to get a free version of the DLC in exchange for showing ads to their enormous audience or anything like that? It's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's something that obviously, I mean, it's a really smart idea, and we we want to have more support for streamers or talent or personalities out there, and so we're trying to figure that out. We haven't figured it out for iDarb yet, but this next project, we've kind of got an idea to do it, and if it works out and we get the technology there, we're just going to move it right over to iDarb, because I think what iDarb is missing right now is a strong spectator mode that would allow people who stream and that sort of thing to do things like stop, freeze frames, rewinds, and draw overs and all that kind of stuff. So our dream is we get to that point, and to engage people to spend that much time and effort, like kind of commenting on streams like that, we want to be able to offer them things like they should be getting free content. They should be seeing it before everybody else so they can prepare for it and that sort of thing. So that's definitely in the plans. We haven't solved it yet, but that's, to me, that's the future of gaming. There's so many people who come to it now that with streaming as big as it is, you realize that you have to serve players. You also have to serve the people who watch the games. You also have to serve the people who curate it for them. And those people can be anybody. So if we can get all those guys together and give them something meaningful, I think it's that virtuous circle that happens.
All right, Mike, can you talk a little bit about, coming from 20 years ago when development tools were not quite as prevalent as they are now, I guess, engines and everything. Do you feel like, I don't know, I know there's a lot of talk, all these engines are free now and there's a lot more access. I guess, how do you feel like that's changing things? Is it always good? Is there some negative? Just, I guess, general thoughts on that.
I think it's always good. As long as, to me, if anybody in the world has the closer anybody in the world has an opportunity to be able to make a game, the better. It's going to break a lot more hearts probably, because people who maybe think they can make games And when you take away all the hurdles, and at the end of the day, their ideas have to be really good, right? And you get judged by all that. That's always going to be there for any creative outlet. So to me, it's only a good thing. And it reminds me of the early days of computing. When I have over here across from my desk, I have a Commodore 64. And that was a day when you would turn on a computer and you could just start programming right on it. You didn't have to install any software. It was BASIC was built in or whatever. It feels like we're back to that kind of accessibility for software creation. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And the fact that there's millions of people now trying to make interactive experiences is only a good thing.
Great. Any other questions? I got more. I just said that if anybody does. Any other questions from the crowd?
I got one.
Yeah.
I noticed that you worked on Berserk back in the day, and I loved that game. I played the crap out of that at the arcades. You must have a unique perspective from working on that and then still designing games. Can you speculate where we're going to be 30 years from now in any way?
Oh yeah, if I could have accurately predicted where we're going over these years, I'd be a millionaire. But it's VR is intriguing because there's a lot of great things going on, a lot of horrible things going on with it. And the great things are everybody in the world is excited by it. But the average person's not ready for it. That's the other crux to this too. Is like I showed my kids the Oculus, and that was great for 2 minutes, and they took it off and they just wanted to go play Minecraft. So there's some challenges to it, but the tech I've been seeing lately, I'm working with a lot of different groups with some R&D efforts that are awesome, and things I've got like piles of NDAs I can't talk about, but it is exciting because the technology is moving really fast and they're solving all those problems. So I think the interface to entertainment experiences going forward is going to really change a lot, and that's the most exciting for me because the ideas of mixed reality, for instance, that HoloLens and Magic Leap hint at, and these sorts of things are changing the way I think of games and things we could play. Like the idea of being able to sit in my office and play like a little choplifter helicopter rescue game with little vehicles that are not really there, and with everybody else in the room and compete against them and stuff like that. That stuff, it looks great and it's going to work, and that's a whole new experience and a new way to design games. So I'm excited about that, and the idea that you can trick reality a bit with all this stuff is mind-blowing because you start use this stuff and you see it. When you walk away, you start thinking of things that you've never thought of before and how fun those sorts of things would be that you just never could have done anywhere else. So that's the exciting thing because I've been through all these demos and I walk out, we have hardware here that is awesome, and you use it, and afterwards you just start coming up with, you start having these ideas you've never had before, and you go in places you've never experienced before. So that's exciting to me. And you guys are all going to be experiencing this stuff within a year, which is going to be nuts. So going into like next year and next holiday, you're going to have access to some crazy hardware that you've never experienced before, and it's just going to make your minds blown, and you're going to want to make sure you're using Unreal or Unity to do some crazy stuff with that. So I'm excited for where mixed reality particularly is going, where it's VR and augmented, and that's going to be mind-blowing.
I guess so what advice would you give somebody that's looking to make video games for a living? You know, we're just about to get out of college, and I think, you know, most people that are graduating, our dream job would be to make video games for a living. What advice do you have for, you know, seniors that are about to graduate?
Already getting rejected.
Yeah, that are already rejected.
Used to rejection, that's one, but always be creating. Don't stop making demos and games, and because to me, I've met so many people over the years, and the ones that have really succeeded are the ones that just live, eat, and breathe making games. And so there's always going to be that moment where somebody's like, what are you working on? And you just bust it out. That's going to be amazing. If you haven't been working on something and you just like have more intent than you have proof, that ends up being a problem. So always have something that you're working on. Always think about where things are going and what you can do to demonstrate where it's going. And always have something to show people. And on top of that, don't get discouraged about things because it's really tough to get jobs anywhere these days, but let alone in software and game entertainment. I cut my teeth on a lot of edutainment software. I worked on Dora titles. I've worked on Disney character titles and princess titles and stuff like that. And every one of those things, I don't regret because I would use that opportunity to get better at what I do. And I could take the technology I built for those things and use them in cool things and stuff like that. So I took I took every opportunity and used it as a stepping stone to get further and further. And so I started with making ports and doing things that were like NFL Blitz for Game Boy and stuff like that, to working on things like IDARB and Street Fighter and stuff like that.
So you haven't had I guess a fear a lot of people have is that they go out in the market and they'll wind up working for some like cruddy mobile company making like a rip-off Angry Birds or something they just have no desire to make. In your experiences that you've been able to find like some fulfillment even though like those
What was that last part?
Yeah, so you've still been able to find fulfillment even if the title was.
Oh yeah, the fun part is like the expectations for a lot of those titles are very low. So like there's nothing more rewarding than hopping in and blowing people's minds with what you can do and what you can bring to something. To me, the challenge has always been, how do I make this Dora game fantastic, or how do I make people want to play an Alice in Wonderland game? And so it was kind of fun. Like we're doing a game for Nintendo called Alice in Wonderland for Game Boy Color. And it got like 9s and 10s and stuff from the gaming press because they were shocked that the game could be so good when it's just some kid's platform title. And that gets recognition. I remember I did this Tarzan game for Game Boy Color based off the movie Tarzan. And like the game for Game Boy Color, I worked so hard to try to capture what I loved about old Genesis games, the Disney Genesis games like Aladdin. And so I did my best to make a game that would live up to that. And as a result, that game ended up outselling the N64 and PlayStation versions combined because those teams, I felt probably, my guess is, they probably didn't take the job as seriously because they didn't want to be working on it. And the Tarzan to me was like, this is my opportunity to work on something I love. So if you can really shine, you'll come out of that, out of the murkiness, I guess, of those games, and people recognize it, and that really helps you move in your career. If you can make a clone of a game better than the original, all eyes are on you.
So if you're making a game that you're not in love with, try to make it something that you're in love with.
Yeah, exactly. Like break the rules and go for it. Because like, if at the end of the day you take away the art and who the characters are, and the game is just amazing, everybody's going to see that, and they're going to want you to do that for something else.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Questions?
So what's your feeling on the rebirth of retro? 8-bit. Obviously, I think I know your answer, but can you talk about a little bit how that there was an awesome shift that came a few years back?
Yeah, I think one thing that it does is it's easy to produce, so it allows more people to make more games, and also it's very nostalgic, so people get really into it. Like I really get into it because it just takes me back to those old days. But you can always have too much of a good thing too. Like I think right now we're reaching like an oversaturation point with it, and so we got to be very careful. Like for every Shovel Knight, there's 40 shovelware versions of that, right? Of like bad pixel games or whatever. And so, I think it's one of these things where the beauty of it is it's easy to produce and it can look great. And in the right hands and the right development team, you can do some really crazy things. And it's nostalgic. People love this stuff. But you've got to be cautious because I saw this when we were putting IDARB out there. The majority of people before the game came out that would look at it was like, why do we have another piece of crap 8-bit game coming to Xbox? Like I bought this thing for AAA titles, whatever. But then later on, there's an awesome forum that showed up of like the Apology to Other Ocean forum of people who would say that, but then apologize afterwards after playing the game. Like, oh, this is actually really good, whatever. So there's that, and it's not necessarily a mass market appeal sort of like approach, but I love it. Obviously, you know how I feel about it, and I don't know how much more I'm going to do in the 8-bit kind of look, but it's a really fun space to work in.
Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, John.
Curious about what that computer is in there.
Oh, can you let us know what the computer is over your left shoulder?
Oh, yeah.
It's a Commodore PET, and it's got a nice terminal look. That monitor is like the larger version model of the PET. It needs some work though. That one broke. I have over here. Let's see if I can pull this off. I have some more computers. I have another PET in the corner, and then there's a Color Computer 3, and a bunch of game systems all hooked up. We just hooked these up a couple weeks ago, and it's just like I have Dragon's Lair running almost 24/7 on the 3DO, and then a bunch of junk over here, old toys and game stuff. But oh yeah, and there's a Galaga machine too.
There you go.
And a Coleco Pac-Man, if you can just notice it there in the foreground. But
very cool.
So is the Commodore what you made IDARB on?
Yeah, essentially. I programmed it like I was using a Commodore, that's for sure. The code is awful.
I'd be curious. How long did it take you to make the game? Or at least get to a functional version?
The first functional version we had, which was in March for the Game Developers Conference, well, publicly functional, that was about 3 weeks after we started. And so it was a weird situation because I started tweeting about the game, got stuff in Microsoft calls halfway through it. And they're like, oh, we love this, what you're doing. We have this new program called ID at Xbox. Would you bring the game to ID at Xbox? And I'm like, at this point, it was still not really a game. So I'm like, sure, why not? And then literally 2 days later, we had dev kits here. And we're just like, well, I guess we should port this. So we ported it. And Microsoft called up a few days later, and they're just like, so do you have anything to show on it? And we're like, well, yeah, it's kind of up and running and that sort of thing. They're like, great, we'll have you at the show and all this stuff. So I figured I would be showing this game with my friends here at the office and sort of a lab experience where it's like, here's all these games in progress. So I showed up on the day of setup before GDC, and I arrived where I'm supposed to set it all up. And I look to my left, and there's like Titanfall. And I look over here, and there's like Dead Rising 3, and then we're in the middle. I'm like, do they even know this game's not even finished? Or I have unlicensed music in it and all this other stuff. And it was kind of scary because they were treating it like it was a finished game. And so we set it all up and, did everything. And when Microsoft came by, we were just like, you do know this thing's not really done. They're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. And it was that show that changed everything because the minute we opened the show, pretty much till when we closed the show, we just had crowds of people, like 5 deep every minute of the day. So it was pretty awesome. And that was like a 3-week-old game.
Wow. Great, that's cool. Yeah.
So, your game jam, I'm expecting you guys to have some finished product by the end of this weekend that I expect to be on console.
I mean, you are.
Any other questions? Okay. I guess as far as, with development, do you have any specific advice as far as, you're working on a game for a week or 2 weeks and you either, I don't know, you lose momentum or things aren't quite going the way you want it to. Do you have any advice on what you do, right, to keep going or to change direction?
Usually what I do, after I get something that I can control and kind of interact with, I just try to get in front of many people as possible. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be somebody at a coffee shop I'm next to. I'll be like, throw a controller in their hands, like, just try this, let me know what you think, whatever. The more people you can get playing it and seeing the reaction, the better. And more often than not, like every idea I come up with is usually pretty bad. So I put it in front of people, and when I see what they're doing and then I ask them what they want, sometimes they'll throw out ideas that I would never even thought of. And even if I don't like them, I'll put them in. And half of IDARB was ideas that I didn't really like when I heard them, but ended up being the best ideas we could have put in the game.
More questions?
So,
throw games. So do you have a general idea, or I guess a statistic as far as how many games you've made, how many were successful versus ones you threw out?
How do you define successful, really? I mean, is it Metacritic score or is it sales? No, it's I'd say probably 10% of the games that I've worked on, I'd say, are successful games in that either they were reviewed well or sold well enough.
Okay.
The rest of them were, not bad, but they were just not like something that you would put on your resume as the best you've ever worked on or any of that sort of thing. I've worked on so many, so that means like, okay, if I've worked on 180 games, that's the 18 games that I'd be happy with. That sounds about right.
Sure. Okay.
And you know what? Actually, I think most people you would talk to in the game industry would probably say about the same thing.
Right.
Unless they've only worked on Halo their career, and then it's like 100%.
So you got to make at least 10 before you got one that's decent, right?
Yeah, it feels like I had 10 failures probably before one would be a good idea, and then another 10 failures before another good idea comes around.
Sure. Okay.
So basically, don't be afraid to fail.
What was that?
Don't be afraid to fail.
Oh yeah. Oh God, no. Like, in fact, fail and fail often, I think, is the quote. It's the best thing because actually, I worked on a game before IDARB called War of the Worlds for Xbox 360, and it was kind of a very personal game. It was a game genre I really liked with people I really liked, and it tanked. It tanked really hard. It was really depressing because it's like, oh, when you pour your heart and soul into something. I mean, we even convinced Patrick Stewart to do the voiceover for it for almost nothing, most stuff. So it's like all these wins during the production, but at the end of the day, the game just wasn't as good as it should have been, and it was really depressing and all sort of stuff. But we had taken what we learned from that game, and which had really strict player controls, like this game called Out of This World and Flashback, these older games, Prince of Persia. It had all these strict character controls that nobody likes anymore. And but I did, but no, apparently nobody else. And so when I started working on IDARB, I went the complete opposite when I first started working on it. I just wanted to create a box that could just move around very freely and in great control without all these kind of limited like segue animations that like the animation driving the movement and all that sort of stuff. And it was like it was my way to kind of retaliate against the criticisms of War of the Worlds. And so that failure led to a lot of revelations during IDAR where I knew automatically like I shouldn't go down this road or this road or this road because we did that on War of the Worlds and it was fail. So all those failures teach you and prepare you for doing your great game, and it's so worth it.
Do you plan on working on the War of the Worlds and like taking that idea and re-implementing it with better controls that after you've relearned it, or do you think that trying to redo it over and over again will stale the project out in some way? How do you?
That's a great question. It's perfect timing because I've worked on a lot of games, and War of the Worlds is one of the few that I get a lot of fan mail for. For the few people who do play the game that like it, they like it a lot. And so we're talking right now. We're discussing with Paramount what the options are for us to take that and try to fix it, because we feel we're pretty passionate about the game. We know that we could fix a lot of it. So if we can get them interested in us doing that, then I think we're going to revisit. But it's one of these things. We get letters from like 7-year-old kids who are like, I really like this game. I really want it on PC. I want it on my PS4 and all stuff. And it's like, and they're really nice letters. And I'm sitting there going like, if anything, we're going to do it for these guys. And we'll also try to make it a bit easier. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we get to do that. And it'll be something that'll be worth talking about later. Keep it in mind. And if you see this thing coming around again, and you see War of the Worlds suddenly announced, you should follow up with me, and I can tell you what we learned fixing that up.
Great. Any other questions on the floor?
I know your old Sega consoles, you were never connected to the internet. Now everything is connected to the internet. Do you think that the negative aspects of that, I mean, we can't stop it, obviously, but is there any fears in the future, like people getting swatted now, having the SWAT teams come to your house while you're live streaming something? I mean, it's just kind of scary. Do you think there's bad outweighs the good? I can't really phrase it just right, but.
You catch that all right?
Yeah, I think the question generally is, do I feel that always on devices and these sorts of things, and also online games in general, everything online, is that something that's all the negatives of that, do they overweigh the positives or vice versa? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah.
It's kind of, we're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think ultimately it's the direction we have to go anyways, because everything, the way we consume entertainment is changing, and it's all coming from a different place. Like consoles, to me, I'm a big game historian, game buff, and I work with like the Smithsonian and like Library of Congress and stuff on preserving video games and that sort of stuff. And to me, the crime is like, these digital games are going away. When a digital system goes away, say like Xbox Live goes away, the games go with it, and you can't play these games anymore. I'm worried more about the historical aspects of it, like these games that you're playing today, World of Warcraft. When the servers go down, you're not going to be able to play that anymore. How do we preserve those things and that sort of thing? Like, I look at a preservation aspect. That's the most frightening to me. On top of that, just the general security and things that kids are exposed to. I think they're exposed to that stuff anyways, outside of games. Watching what my son is exposed to. He's 8 and he plays this game called Air Coaster on the iPad. And I didn't realize there were forums in there. And so people, like every coaster you upload and all this stuff, people are discussing and saying things to you. And like he's dealing with crazy drama that you only see on Twitter generally. And it's on this Air Coaster app. And at 8 years old, and I'm told, like, okay, that's it. You're not playing this anymore, because he's worried. This one guy was like ripping off his roller coaster. There's people accusing him of plagiarism, and there's people telling him his tracks suck and like all this stuff. And really cruel people were saying awful things to him. And I'm like, this is not good. But ultimately, we have to figure that out across the board, not just in games. It's going to have to be figured out, in general. And I think games just are going to have to be part of this new way we do everything. So with IDARB, for instance, we have this Twitter crawl that goes at the bottom of the game, and people like pretty quickly decided that's a great way to say the most awful things they could ever think of, and it'll get into everybody's game around the world. So in the next update, we have kind of like the PBS filtered version that you can turn on. You can shut it. We have it right now. You can shut it off, and then you have the raw version. We're not going to take the raw version away, because ultimately we want, the real internet is what it is, and you can have that. And then we also have the kind of filtered version. But I don't know. It's really hard because like one developer is not going to be able to solve it, but you also have to embrace it or it doesn't really work. Like we wouldn't have our audience if we didn't just embrace the craziness of it. But at the same time, it's like you want to have some control over how do I filter out the awfulness of the internet.
From a preservation standpoint, like you mentioned, like the NES, all of those games you just pop in a cart, and so long as that cart is still functioning, you can still play it. I still have a lot of my dad's from when he played. But a lot of the different art forms are like people are aiming for that live, can't go back to it with streaming and then online games. And then there's a lot of like visual art, like graffiti type things where people are doing it and you have to like see it as it happens, because by the end of it, it's all gone. And people are like actively aiming to like do that. Is with all of the art forms, people aiming for that irreplaceable, is it something that should be preserved, or does that like lose the irreplaceability in the moment aspect that they're aiming for with that kind of art?
It's funny because like the now says that's what it should be, and then history says we need to have that preserved every single time. So it's we look back on, there's a game called Habitat that LucasArts made. It was the first MMO. It was on CompuServe, I think, or Quantum Link, I think it was. And it was a live game that once the servers went down, it was just gone forever, and no one's been able to experience that game since. However, everybody who's worked on World of Warcraft or any MMO and some of the biggest and most successful games out there say and refer to Habitat as one of the most inspirational games that led to those things happening. Yet nobody can go and see what that game is like. And that's the big shame to me, because you can go back in film, which film had its own problems of preservation, but you can go to film, you can go to books, you can go to like literature and all that stuff, and you can find these things, and they were preserved pretty well. Software was not for the longest time because it was very throwaway, especially those early online games. And so now it's just a big race to try to preserve that sort of stuff. Like Xbox Live, when that switch goes off, the only copies we have of those games and playable versions of those games that could be potentially put back together are the pirated versions of those games. In fact, piracy is one of the biggest success stories of software preservation, because as evil as it is, some of the games that exist today are thanks to piracy. And so not to endorse it or anything else, but just to show how big the problem is, it's piracy that's preserving a lot of the artifacts in game development and game history. And so I have over here, let me see if I can show you this. There's like a black bag on top of a big disk drive on a white box there. That disk drive that's on that white box has a version of a game that I can't say, that is the only version of a game that was being developed at Atari that nobody knows about, that was probably one of the most impressive, technically advanced games that Atari's ever worked on for home computers. And it's sitting on that drive right over there. And so we're working really hard to try to preserve that game and get it off this thing and share it with the world and let people see this thing. That's the only copy, and it's sitting on a white box in my office right now. That should actually be backed up, and it should have been backed up way back in the day. And so that sort of stuff is happening all the time, and not fast enough. That bit rot and everything that's sitting in right now, there's a lot of games being lost every single day that will never see the light of day, but impacted millions of people.
So I guess which side you're on in the current EFF and ESA debate, right? That's
I love the ESA. I love all these guys, and like the thing is though, everybody has their own like they have their opinions and where they are and stuff, and it's all for the right reasons. But you look back and you say like, well, if this didn't exist, then we wouldn't have this. That this wouldn't exist, or these sorts of things. And so it's just a cry for like there needs to be more organization to software preservation and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So if you had your choice, would you, do you have a platform, I guess, that you would rather play every single game on? If you could play every game on an arcade cabinet, would that be your choice? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a good question. Like, I don't know, I grew up with an Atari 2600, but I'd say my platform of choice was probably either the Super Nintendo or the PlayStation, original PlayStation.
Okay.
And that form factor and stuff is like going home every time I play a game. I was playing Star Fox the other day on the Super Nintendo, and I just love the controller and everything like that. But at the end of the day, like, you're still, if I want to play every game, I'd have to have something like an Xbox One controller or a PlayStation 4 controller.
Okay.
More questions?
Yeah.
I know you talked about how you were feeling when you were bringing that game for the first time to that conference. What would you say was some of the biggest risks you've taken in your career?
Yeah, some of the biggest risks. There's a lot. Let's see, which ones do I pick? When we did that Disney Tarzan game on Game Boy, we made it color only so that we could have more animation and have Disney quality animation in the game. And we were working for Activision at the time. Game Boy Color had just come out, so there wasn't a very big installed base. And so we told them that we were doing Game Boy Color only. They flipped out because they're like, there's no installed base. We're not going to make any money. You got to make it backwards compatible. We were so far along making it this like really beautifully animated platform game. And so we fought, and it almost got canceled. And finally they conceded, but they said, you have to make a black and white version after we launch this. So you're going to have to go back and like pull stuff out, do whatever you have to do, but we're going to start doing this right away as soon as we launch this. So we launched it, and in 2 weeks it sold 1 million copies, and they decided, okay, that's fine. But the risk up to that point, like if they canceled that game, like we would have been out of business and all this other stuff. And here I am, just like this younger guy who's just like, I don't care if we go out of business. This is the right thing to do and all this stuff. If I were doing it now today, I'd probably be like, hey, kids got to eat, whatever you guys want. But I stuck by my convictions back then, and it's kind of scary because in hindsight, like so many people's careers and stuff were on the line on my dumb decision of like, I don't care. It's got to look good and that sort of thing. But it worked and it paid off, and that was really good. The other thing was we're showing this game called Death Jr. that we're working on for PSP. It was the first PSP game ever to be shown. And they invited us to be on stage when they were announcing the PSP with Sony at the Game Developer Conference. So I'm on the stage with like 2,500 people in the audience, millions everywhere else. And every rehearsal we did up to that point, the demo crashed right away. And so I'm like, what do we do now? Do we not show it? What do we, because it's just not working. And they're like, well, we just go on stage and we just see what happens. And I'm like, well, if it crashes, what do we do after that? And they're like, I don't know, but we have like 5 minutes, so we're just going to do it. And so that was the most panicked I've ever been in my life because there's no way this thing was going to work. And then the moment came, and I had no idea. It's still at this point, I was just like, I just don't know what's going to happen. And started up, and it just worked, and it went through the whole demo and didn't crash. But it was Russian roulette on stage. It could have ended my career, or in this case, it made it go further. So that was the scariest, riskiest moment in my career. I don't recommend it.
Any other questions? All right, I think
Let me ask one more, and then
Okay.
we'll probably get ready to wrap up. Well, Olivia, you got one?
Well, I just wanted to say, thank you for making that Donkey Kong hat because there's so few a good representation of women in video games. And I'm really sorry for any negativity that you received from that. But, for me, that made my day when I saw that article.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank my daughter because it was all her idea, and she's awesome, and she's like she's amazing, and she loves playing games with me. Like every day, she's always like, let's play games, and it's one of these things where I didn't realize, like I could not, being a guy, I just didn't see the imbalance my whole life because it's just like I see it all through my eyes. But seeing the world through her eyes has totally changed me as a developer, as a person, and as a father. So it's like seeing the world through her eyes was just amazing. And to do that, and not like when I did, I had no idea what impact it would have on people. I was just doing it for myself, and my daughter, and all along the way, like Adam Boyce, who's now at Sony, he was tweeting it and he put it on Reddit, and that's what made it explode. But like, I never would have in a million years fathomed that would have had the impact. And it helps that Anita Sarkeesian stuff was going on all at the same time. But like, since that happened, it's changed me and my approach to things. So now I feel like I'm more prepared for what needs to happen in the games I work on and that sort of thing. And you can see with IDARB, I want to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to be anybody they wanted to be in the game. And that sort of things inform me for all my designs going forward. And I'm just like glad my daughter had that idea at the time that had an effect on me, and she's changed me now as a game developer. It's awesome.
Great. Okay, man, one more. Yeah, go ahead.
To bounce off of that question, there are a lot of different people that want to handle that issue in a lot of different ways. What do you think would help bring the entire community closer to a more equal standpoint?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have the answer. I wish I had the answers, but with the climate as it is and the opinions that are out there, it's really challenging right now because there's so many strong opinions. And the thing that I think would really help is for people to have more of the experience I had taking something that I had known and that I had seen as just an institution, and to see it through the eyes I had, changing it and the impact it had on people's lives. If they could see that, so if there's an experience that can be created where you can actually for yourself witness what happens when you do something very minor, but the magnitude and effect it has on so many people, that will probably change a lot of opinions, because right now people are just kind of in these small bubbles and they don't value like one issue over the other and stuff as much as they do their issues and this sort of thing. If they could experience what I experienced on that in some way, and in my mind I keep thinking like, how can you deliver that? It's not the actual gameplay experience, it's the experience of changing something for the better. And not the better, like make the game better and stuff, but for the better of, like my daughter or for people you love or this sort of thing. If you can give them that experience and see how much like impact that has on somebody, that can probably work. But I don't know what that is yet, and I've been racking my brains trying to figure out how to do that.
Well, it was great because you didn't throw away the original. The original was still there, but you got choice, right?
It's still there now. You have a choice. And the other thing about it is like something that everybody knew very well. And to do that change gave you a perspective. So you knew where it was, you knew what you changed, and then you could see the effect it had on people. And so if there's some way that you can give people the power to do that, that's one idea I have. I don't know. There's a million I hope that we all come up with along the way.
All right. Any other questions before? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, guys. This is awesome to be on this, and congratulations. This is going to be a good weekend.
Yeah, we hope so. No, but yeah, thank you again so much for your time, and yeah, we'll take the inspiration and the comments, and we'll make games here.
All right, and you know what? I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. I'll follow up next week and see the results. It'll be, I expect good things. I think, right?
Yeah. Awesome things.
We'll do our best.
All right.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, bye.
Have a good weekend. Goodbye.